Welcome to Sleep for Stories. Thank you for joining us on this relaxing and mysterious journey. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future tales. Wishing you a peaceful listening experience and a restful sleep. Dr. Marcus Hales stood at the edge of the silent lake, the dense blackroot forest at his back, and a chill creeping up his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The sun struggled to pierce the thick canopy above, casting fragmented beams of fog, light that danced on the water's surface. The air was thick with moisture and the scent of pine, mingling with something else, something old and unsettling, like damp stone and decaying wood. He glanced at the water, so unnaturally still that it seemed to defy nature itself. It was as if the lake were a polished mirror, reflecting not only the sky, but the secrets it kept hidden beneath. The legend of the silent lake was one he had encountered many times in obscure journals and half-told campfire tales, stories of a once thriving village that had disappeared overnight, swallowed by the lake's dark embrace, leaving only the echoes of its people behind. No bodies, no ruins, just whispers that rode the wind and an eerie silence that had kept locals away for generations. Even Marcus's great-grandfather, an intrepid explorer who had chronicled myths from around the world, had avoided this place, leaving behind cryptic notes that spoke of dangers that should not be disturbed. Are we really doing this? Nora's voice cut through the quiet, shaky, yet laced with excitement. The investigative journalist had a knack for finding stories that made most people's skin crawl. She clutched her notebook tightly, eyes wide as she scanned the dark water. Elena, the underwater archaeologist whose reputation for bravery was unmatched, shot Nora a grin. "What's the matter, Nora? Finally found a ghost story that scares you?" "Not scared," Nora muttered, more to convince herself. Just cautious. Jacob, the historian with a penchant for ancient riddles, was already flipping through old maps and sketches of the area, brow furrowed as he compared notes. The village was called Ebon Hollow, he said, almost to himself. It was known for its ritual ceremonies meant to commune with something they believed lived beneath the lake. No one knows what happened the night they vanished, but the stories say they vanished. Heard a sound, like a low hum, that resonated through the earth before silence took everything. Alex, the tech expert and diving specialist, was adjusting the oxygen tanks, the metallic clinks and hisses of gear filling the air. He glanced up, a smirk on his face that belied the tension in his eyes. "Well, I guess we're about to meet whatever hummed them into oblivion," he said, half joking, half serious. Marcus' hand tightened around the leather-bound journal had brought a relic passed down from his great-grandfather. Its weathered pages were filled with sketches of places he had explored, and on one page, a hastily written note read, "Some doors should remain closed." But the explorer's urge in Marcus was stronger than his caution. The silent lake had kept its secrets long enough. "We're here to find answers," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Whatever happened to Ebon Hollow? It's time the world knew. The sun was dipping, lower now, casting a deep amber hue over the treetops. The lake's surface shimmered, almost invitingly, yet there was something predatory in the way it seemed to watch them, like a beast lying in wait. Elena moved first, pulling on her diving mask and securing her equipment. She shot Marcus a look that said, "Are you ready for this?" He nodded, slipping into his own gear as Alex followed suit. Jacob and Nora stayed on the shore, setting up monitoring equipment and documenting the moment. The soft hum of generators and the clicking of cameras were the only sounds, making the quiet that followed even more oppressive when they ceased. Elena took the first step into the water, the ripple spreading out and disappearing as if swallowed by the lake itself. The air seemed to thicken as Marcus and Alex joined her, the chill biting through their suits as they waded deeper. Finally, with one last glance at the shore, Marcus nodded, and they submerged. The water closed over their heads, muffling the world above, and plunging them into a realm where light and sound were twisted, filtered through layers of murky, green-tinged water. The descent began, the rhythmic sound of their breathing and the occasional hiss of air from their tanks, the only reminders of life. The world above faded away as Marcus, Elena, and Alex sank deeper into the water's embrace. The first 20 feet were dappled with fractured light, allowing glimpses of the silty lake bed and drifting strands of algae that danced lazily in the current. But as they descended further, the light thinned, replaced by a dim green that grew darker with each pulse of their flashlights. The lake, once inviting and serene from above, now felt vast and unforgiving, as if it were an ancient beast that had swallowed them whole. Marcus kept his breathing steady, the rhythmic sound in his ears a lifeline against the oppressive silence. He glanced at Elena, who was leading the descent, her figure framed by the halo of her headlamp behind them. Alex floated with ease, one hand adjusting the sonar device strapped to his arm. The device emitted a low ping that resonated through the water, mapping their surroundings and searching for anomalies. The pings came back clear at first, just the undulating contours of the lake floor and scattered debris. But as they continued, the readings became erratic, the sonar tracing shapes that defied logic. Marcus, look at this. Alex's voice crackled through the comms, tinged with both excitement and confusion. The screen on his device pulsed, showing the outline of what appeared to be structures buildings that rose up like jagged teeth from the silt. Elena turned, eyes wide behind her mask. Could it be? The remains of Ebon Hollow. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The idea that they might have actually found it, the sunken village lost to myth and time, was almost too much to grasp. He nodded, signaling for them to move forward. The silence around them thickened as they pushed deeper, the water pressing against them like a living thing. Suddenly, a shadow shifted at the edge of Marcus's vision. He turned his flashlight, the beam cutting through the murk to reveal the silhouette of what could only be a crumbling stone wall covered in dark, undulating moss. Just beyond, more structures materialized, outlines of cottages, and what looked like a small chapel, their shapes blurred and softened by decades beneath the lake. The village was eerily preserved, as if waiting for someone to find it. The comms crackled again, this time with Nora's voice from the shore. We're picking up some strange readings from your location. There's a shift in the magnetic field. Are you guys seeing anything unusual? Marcus hesitated, eyes darting to the ruins around them. Define unusual. There was a pause, followed by Jacob's voice, low and serious. Just be careful. If the stories are true, the village wasn't just lost to a flood. Something else kept up it buried. Before Marcus could respond, Elena swam forward, her flashlight catching on an old wooden sign, barely legible beneath a thick coating of algae. She brushed it with her gloved hand, revealing the words, "Welcome to Ebon Hollow," carved in ornate script. The sight sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. They had found it. Alex's voice broke through again, this time strained. Marcus, I'm getting weird feedback here. It's like something's moving. His sonar pinged, erratically, the screen lighting up with shifting shapes that didn't match the stillness around them. A sudden current swept past them, tugging at their suits and stirring up a cloud of silt that momentarily blinded them. Marcus's flashlight wavered, casting frantic beams that illuminated ghostly tendrils of algae and the hollow windows of sunken homes. When the silt settled, the silence returned, deeper and more oppressive than before. But then, just as the water stilled, a new sound emerged. It was low and guttural, a hum that resonated through their chests and vibrated the water around them. It was the sound from the stories, the hum that had signaled the village's doom. Marcus felt a chill crawl down his spine. We need to get out of here," he said, the urgency sharp in his voice. But before anyone could respond, the hum grew louder, shaking the water like a living heartbeat. And then, from the darkened doorway of the chapel, something moved. Elena stops by New Jeans. Elena's flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams across the ruined facade of the submerged chapel. The movement within was subtle at first, a shadow shifting just beyond the threshold, a fleeting glimpse of something impossibly large and ancient. The hum resonated through the water, growing in intensity until it seemed to press against their chests, each vibration syncing with the pounding of their hearts. Marcus's fingers tightened around the journal clipped to his suit. He tried to steady his breathing, but the comms crackled again, filled with static and voices that weren't supposed to be there, whispers that spoke in a language long forgotten, woven through with urgent, mournful tones. "Elena, Alex, we need to fall back now," Marcus said, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. The silence that followed was filled only by the hum, now pulsing like a drum beat deep in the earth. Elena turned, eyes wide, but she hesitated, her gaze locked on the chapel's doorway. "Marcus, do you hear that? It's calling to us." The words hung between them, heavy and inexplicable. Before Marcus could respond, Alex's voice burst through the comms, strained and sharp. "Movement behind us? Something's circling." Marcus swung his flashlight around just in time to catch the flicker of motion, a dark shape sliding through the silt, serpentine and deliberate. The water seemed to shudder as the shape moved, disturbing the thick, ancient sediment that had settled over Ebon Hollow like a shroud from the shore. Nora's panicked voice cut through. "Get out of there now! The readings just spiked. The field around you is shifting." The hum crescendoed, and with it, the village seemed to awaken. The doors of long-submerged homes creaked open, silt and debris swirling, as if pushed by unseen hands. The windows of the cottages were hollow eyes, watching, waiting. The water felt alive, charged with an energy that set Marcus's teeth on edge. "Elena, we're leaving," Marcus shouted, his voice tight as he reached for her arm. But before he could touch her, the doorway of the chapel erupted in a burst of movement. A figure emerged, shrouded in darkness, its form obscured by the swirling silt. It stood unnaturally tall, its limbs elongated and thin, fingers that tapered to points waving as if conducting the symphony of the hum. The figure's eyes opened two cold white orbs that glowed with an unearthly light. They locked onto Marcus, and in that instant, he felt an unbearable pressure in his head, a voice not his own pressing into his mind. "You should not have come," Elena gasped, the sound muffled by her mask. The voice, though silent to the ears, filled their comms with a static-laced presence, words etched into their thoughts. The figure moved, gliding through the water with impossible grace, its movements disjointed and alien. Alex's sonar screamed with feedback, the device flashing erratically. "We need to move now," he shouted, already propelling himself backward. The shadows that had circled them now coalesced, taking forms that shifted and blurred, reflections of villagers caught in an eternal, restless dance. Elena's gaze broke from the figure, and she grabbed Marcus's arm. We have to go. Her voice was a lifeline, snapping him out of the trance that held him. They pushed through the water, muscles straining against the heavy current that seemed to pull at them with unseen hands. The hum followed, louder, reverberating through their suits, through their bones, whispering promises of secrets best left buried. As they broke away from the heart of the village, Marcus cast a final glance over his shoulder. The figure stood at the entrance of the chapel, eyes dimming as silver. Eyes dimming as silver, eyes dimming as silver. It raised one elongated arm in a gesture that felt almost sorrowful. The whispers receded, replaced by an aching silence that throbbed in his ears. They ascended quickly, the light above growing brighter, slicing through the darkness, assassin. They pushed toward the surface. The weight of the lake lessened with each kick, and when they finally broke through, gasping for air, the silence was replaced by the roar of the wind and the soft pitter-patter of rain against the lake. Nora and against the lake. Jacob rushed to the edge of the water, eyes wide with a mix of relief and horror. "What did you see?" Jacob asked, voice barely steady. Marcus pulled off his mask, chest heaving as he met their gaze. "Ebon Hollow isn't just a ruin, it's awake, and it remembers." The air above the silent lake crackled with tension as Marcus, Elena, and Alex surfaced, their gasps mingling with the rustle of leaves in the wind and the rhythmic patter of rain. The water around them was eerily still, as if the lake itself had paused to watch them, waiting for their next move. Marcus pulled himself and paused to watch them, waiting for their next move. Marcus pulled himself up onto the makeshift dock, his hands shaking as adrenaline coursed through his veins. The journal he had kept close was now damp, pages curling and ink smudging, but it didn't matter. The real record was what they had seen and felt beneath the surface. Jacob and Nora rushed to meet them, their eyes wide with worry. Jacob's face was pale, the historian's usually steady demeanor fractured by the tension. "Did you find it?" he asked, voice taut. He already knew the answer from their frantic comm chatter, but needed to hear it spoken aloud, as if saying it would make it real. Marcus met his gaze, nodding slowly. "We found it. Ebon Hollow is down there, and it's alive?" The words hung in the air, sending a shiver through the group. Elena, her expression haunted, glanced back at the water. "There was something in the chapel," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "Something that ship pictures could show to anyone else. Something that looked at us like it knew who we were." Nora, ever the skeptic despite her love for ghost stories, pressed further. "What did it do? Did it try to communicate with you?" X, still catching his breath, shook his head. "Not in words. It spoke in a way that wasn't sound. It was inside our heads." His voice dropped, eyes unfocused as he replayed the memory. "It said we shouldn't have come." The campo fell silent. The soft rustle of the forest around them felt suffocating, the usual chirps and calls conspicuously absent. Marcus leaned against a wooden post, staring at the journal. His great-grandfather's warnings echoed in his mind. His great-grandfather's warnings echoed in his mind. Doors should remain closed. But they had opened that door, and now there was no turning back. Night fell over the lake with an unnatural swiftness, the sky turning from overcast gray to a deep, velvety black. The expedition team had retreated to their base camp, a circle of tents and a small fire that crackled and popped, throwing flickering light against the trees. The warmth was welcome, but it did little to dispel the chill that had settled in their bones. Nora sat by the fire, scribbling furiously in her notebook, trying to piece together the disjointed fragments of what they'd witnessed. Her pen stilled when she heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible hum that made the hair on her arms stand on end. She looked up, eyes up, darting to the water's edge where the dark surface reflected nothing but the pale light of the moon. "Did anyone else hear that?" she whispered, voice trembling. Jacob's head snapped up, eyes narrowing as he listened. The hum grew louder, resonating like a heartbeat that throbbed in the very air. Marcus felt it too, a vibration deep in his chest that seemed to sync with his chest, that seemed to sink within the beat of his own heart. He exchanged a glance with Elena, who was already reaching for her gear, instincts driving her to action before anyone could react. The water at the lake's edge rippled, small waves lapping at the shore with a hypnotic rhythm. The sound was almost soothing, if not for the underlying hum that accompanied it. Then, out of the stillness, a voice emerged, not spoken, but a whisper that seemed to drift from the trees, the water, the very ground beneath their feet. "Why have you come?" Jacob's mouth moved, but no sound came out. The others froze, muscles locked as the voice surrounded them. It was the same voice they had heard beneath the water, layered and mournful, as if many spoke as one. The fire flickered, sputtered, and then roared higher, casting elongated, writhing shadows that moved as if alive. Marcus forced himself to stand, legs unsteady. "We came for answers," he said, the words barely escaping his dry throat. "We want to understand what happened here." The silence that followed was suffocating, stretching for what felt like hours. Then the hum returned, deeper this time, vibrating the ground. The water rippled again, and out of the dark depths, something began to rise, a figure, tall and gaunt, cloaked in shadow but with eyes that glowed like cold embers. It stood motionless at the water's edge, staring at them with an intensity that made their breath catch. "Ebon Hollow was not lost," the voice said, emanating from the figure, though its mouth did not move. "It was taken. The silence is not peace, it is a prison." Elena took a step back, eyes wide. "Who are you?" she whispered. The figure tilted its head, the movement slow and deliberate. "A warning," it said, and in that moment, the hum reached a fever pitch. The ground beneath their feet shook, and the air crackled with energy, as the figure crackled with energy, as the figure dissolved back into the lake, leaving only the echo of its final words. "Leave, before the silence takes you too." The camp erupted into chaos. The fire sputtered out, leaving only darkness and the pounding of their hearts. Marcus grabbed the journal, fingers shaking. The pages flipped wildly in the wind, landing on one he had not read before. Written in hurried, desperate script were the words, "To break the silence, one must uncover the truth." The chaos of the camp was palpable. As the team scrambled to regroup, the cold night air pressed against them, thick with the lingering echoes of the warning. Marcus's heart pounded as he gripped the journal tighter, its damp, crinkled pages whispering under his fingertips. He glanced at Elena, who stood frozen, eyes locked on the lake where the apparition had vanished moments before. The fire, now reduced to smoldering embers, cast faint shadows that seemed to shift of their own accord. "We need to leave," Alex said, his voice breaking the tense silence. He was already packing up his equipment, movements jerky with urgency. "Whatever that was, it's not something we're prepared to face." "No," Marcus said, surprising even himself with the firmness of the firmness. His tone. The others turned to him, eyes wide with disbelief. "We can't just leave. Not now. We're closer than anyone has ever been to understanding what happened here." Jacob stepped forward, the lines of worry etched deep into his face. "Marcus, you saw it. We all did. This isn't just a story, it's something more. Something dangerous." Elena shook her head, a steely resolve replacing the fear in her eyes. "But we can't walk away if we do. The truth stays buried, and whatever holds Ebon Hollow will continue. We need to find out what binds this place." Nora swallowed hard, her pen and notepad clutched tightly against her chest. And if we don't make it out? The question hung in the air. Unspoken fears now given voice. Marcus opened the journal again, fingers flipping to the page with the hastily scrawled warning. To break the silence, one must uncover the truth. His great-grandfather had known something, and whatever it was had kept him from venturing into the lake. But Marcus felt the weight of generations pressing on him, urging him to see it through. We need to go back, he said finally, the decision sinking in like a stone. To the chapel. That's where it all began, and that's where we'll find our answers. The team's return to the water was marked by a somber silence. The only sounds the soft rustle of their gear and the muted lapping of waves. The moon hung low, casting a silvery sheen over the lake that made it appear both serene and menacing. One by one, they submerged, the icy water biting into their skin despite their wetsuits. This time, the descent felt heavier. The darkness seemed thicker. Green-tinged light swallowed more quickly by the depths. Marcus kept his eyes forward, focused on the chapel's silhouette as it came into view, standing sentinel amidst the ruins of Ebon Hollow. As they neared the entrance, the hum returned, low and insistent, vibrating through their bodies. Marcus glanced at Elena, who nodded, the beam of her flashlight unwavering, as she led them inside. The interior was a haunting echo of what it once must have been pews upturned. A stone altar cracked down the middle, and the walls covered in dark, shifting algae that seemed to pulse with life. On the far wall, behind the altar, a mural was partially visible. Marcus moved closer, the light from his torch revealing scenes of the village. The people gathered in what appeared to be a ritual. At the center stood a figure draped in shadow, arms raised as the others looked on, expressions of awe and fear etched into their painted faces. "This is it," Jacob said, his voice ed. Jacob said, his voice ed, crackling through the comms, the ritual that doomed them. Suddenly, the whispers began again, soft at first, but growing louder, filling the chapel with a cacophony of voices. They spoke in fragments, overlapping in a symphony of despair. They called to it. They brought it forth, and it answered. Elena turned, her light catching movement near the altar. A faint shimmer appeared, and then, as if stepping through a veil, the spectral figure from before materialized. Its eyes, those cold, white orbs, fixed on them, and the voices fell silent. Marcus felt an unnatural pressure build in his chest, as if the water itself had turned to stone. The figure raised a long skeletal hand, pointing to the mural. The whispered voice from before returned, singular and commanding. Only by understanding the past can the silence be broken. Elena's flashlight fell on an inscription below the mural, the letters worn but legible. She read aloud, her voice worn but legible, shaking. In the heart of silence, we bound ourselves to what lies beneath, to break the silence, speak the name, and release what was taken. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. The hum grew louder, resonating in a way that made the walls vibrate. It was as if the lake itself had awakened, responding to the words. The spectral figure's form flickered, its eyes narrowing as it uttered one final chilling command. Speak, or be consumed. The echo of the figure's command reverberated through the chapel, settling like a weight in the chest of every team member. Marcus exchanged a glance with Elena, the fear in her eyes mirrored in his own. But there was no turning back now. They had come too far, and the truth far. And the truth was close, so close that it burned in the back of Marcus's mind. Jacob's voice came through the comms, strained and urgent. "Marcus, whatever that inscription means, we need to figure it out now." The mural's haunting depiction seemed to shift under the beam of their flashlights. as if the figures painted on the wall were trapped in an eternal loop of their last fateful moments. Marcus's gaze fell on the shadowy figure at the center, its face obscured but its form unmistakable. A leader, or perhaps a priest, who had invoked something dark and unfathomable. "Speak the name," Elena whispered, more to herself than anyone else, her eyes fixed on the mural. But whose name? Who did they summon? Nora's voice, shaky and barely above a whisper, crackled over the comms. "Marcus, the journal. Look at the journal." With trembling hands, Marcus opened the water-damaged pages, searching for a clue, anything that would give them the answer. Near the back, in a section that had been nearly overlooked, was an entry scrawled hastily in his great-grandfather's familiar handwriting. "In the silence of the lake, there is one name they feared to speak, the name that binds and feared to speak, name that frees. Alastor." Marcus's blood ran cold. Alastor, a name spoken only in whispers by the few who dared recount the legend. The villagers had worshipped it, sought its power, and paid the ultimate price. "Alina, it's Alastor. Marcus, Elena, it's Alastor," said, the weight of the revelation heavy in his voice. "We have to say it." The spectral figure shifted, its eyes narrowing as if it understood. The hum grew deeper, resonating with an almost painful intensity. Marcus took a deep breath and that's extra intensity. Marcus took a deep breath and spoke, his voice echoing through the flooded chapel. "Alastor!" The effect was immediate. The water around them vibrated, a low rumble building until it was deafening. The mural on the wall began to glow, the painted figures seeming to writhe in agony and ecstasy. The light intensified, spreading across the walls and floor, illuminating symbols that had been hidden beneath years of silt and darkness. The spectral figure remained motionless, its expression unreadable as the glow surrounded it. Then, with a sudden, fluid motion, it stepped back into the wall, merging with the mural. The whispers rose to a crescendo, overlapping voices that spoke in a cacophony of languages and emotions. "The silence is broken. The silence is the truth is free." The glow from the mural exploded outward, filling the chapel with a searing light. Marcus shielded his eyes, the intensity of it burning through his eyes when the light receded. The silence that followed was profound, as if the entire lake had taken a breath and held it. Elena was the first to lower her arm, blinking as her vision cleared. The chapel was different now, still old and decayed, but there was a feeling of peace, as though a weight had been lifted. Hum was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. The spectral figure was nowhere to be seen, but its presence lingered, as if it had been absorbed into the very stones of the chapel. Marcus looked around, the realization sinking in. They had broken the silence, but what had they released? Jacob's voice came through, hoarse and breathless. "Are you all okay?" The readings just spiked and then dropped completely. "We're fine," Marcus replied, though his voice wavered. "But I think we just witnessed the end of the curse." Nora's voice chimed in, a mix of relief and lingering fear. "The question is, what did you set free?" Before Marcus could answer, a low rumble shook the floor beneath them. The water around their feet began to swirl, forming small whirlpools that grew in size and strength. The team backed away, eyes wide as the whirlpools converged into one. Eyes wide as the whirlpools converged into one. A dark vortex that spun with an unnatural speed. Out of the center, a shape began to rise, a figure not spectral, but solid, flesh and bone. It was a man, or what had once been a man. His skin was ashen, eyes sunken and glowing faintly with the same cold white light. He stood tall, robes clinging to his thin frame, symbols etched into the fabric that pulsed with a rhythmic glow. Marcus's heart stuttered as he realized who it was. Alastair, Jacob whispered. The name barely forming on his lips. The figure's gaze swept over them, eyes narrowing in recognition. You have broken my silence, he said, voice deep and resonant. And now, you will bear witness to what lies beyond. Elena stepped forward, determination burning in her eyes. You know what you did. You bound those people to this place, trapped their souls. Alastair's mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I gave them what they asked for, power, immortality, freedom from the bounds of the living. But they did not understand the price, and neither do you. The chapel trembled, the ancient stone creaking as cracks formed along the walls. The mural behind Alastair glowed once more, the figures depicted on it now seeming to reach out, their faces twisted in silent screams. The voices returned, no longer whispers but shouts, a demand for release that resonated through the bones of the living. Marcus raised the journal, eyes darting over the hastily written notes. Their eyes darting over the hastily written notes had to be more something they could use to end this. But the words blurred, the edges of the pages curling as if touched by invisible flames. Marcus, now would be a really good time for a plan, Alex shouted, eyes wide as the vortex at their feet surged again. I'm trying, Marcus yelled back, desperation seeping into his voice. The chapel groaned under the weight of unseen forces as the ground quaked beneath their feet. Dust and debris rained down from the cracked stone ceiling, and the glow from the mural from the cracked stone ceiling intensified, bathing the room in an eerie light. Marcus's mind raced, the whispers of the journal's words intertwining with the shouts of his teammates. This was more than just a haunting. It was an unraveling, a breaking of the barrier that had held this dark force at bay for generations. Alastair's eyes, luminous and cold, locked onto Marcus. The silence was your protection, he said, his voice reverberating through the chapel like a storm. Now that it is broken, there will be no peace, only the echoes of what was taken. Elena stepped forward, defying the tremor in her hands. There has to be a way to stop this. What did they do? What binds you here? The figure tilted his head, a smirk flickering across his lips. You wish to know the truth? It was their desire for eternal life that called me. Their voices that invoked the silence. They paid the price willingly, though they did not understand it. Alex, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill, shouted, Enough of this cryptic shouted. Enough of this cryptic garbage. Tell us how to end it. A flicker of anger crossed Alastair's pale features, and the whirlpool at their feet surged, sending up a spray of water that clung to their clothes like ice. The voices in the mural screamed in silent agony, the figure's eyes rolling back as their hands pressed against the painted barrier, as if trying to claw their way out. Marcus flipped through the journal, his fingers tracing every hastily written line until one entry caught his attention. It was nearly smudged beyond recognition. But the words rang clear in his mind. Only by reversing the invocation can the silence be restored. A willing voice must speak, not of greed, but of release. He swallowed hard, the meaning sinking in. To end this, someone had to offer themselves as the vessel to reverse the curse willingly, with no promise of reward, only sacrifice. He looked up at the others, dread pooling in his chest. The price had been clear all along. We have to reverse it, Marcus said. Voice said, tight. Someone has to speak and offer release. not power. Elena's eyes widened as the realization set in. Marcus, no, there has to be another way. There isn't, Marcus said resolute. He stepped forward, the journal clutched to his ears chest as he met Alastair's unwavering gaze. This ends now. The figure's expression shifted, the smirk fading into something akin to curiosity. The whirlpool calmed, the air around them holding its breath as Marcus spoke. By the voice of the living, I call for release, Marcus said, each word steady and deliberate. Not for power, but for peace. The glow from the mural pulsed, and the cries within it softened to whispers. The chapel walls vibrated, cracks splintering like walls vibrated, cracks splintering like spiderwebs across the stone. Alistair's form flickered, eyes narrowing, as if assessing Marcus's intent. You dare challenge what was done? Alistair's voice was quieter now, almost introspective. I do, Marcus said, louder this time. Let them go. Let this place be at peace. A silence deeper than any they had felt before descended, pressing into their ears and chest like a suffocating weight. Then, with a sudden, blinding flash, the mural fractured, pieces falling away to reveal an endless expanse of darkness. Beyond, the painted figures dissolved, their cries turning into sighs of relief as they vanished. Alistair's form wavered, the glow in his eyes fading to an ember. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement, before disintegrating into the same light that had carried the others. The water stilled, the swirling vortex collapsing in on itself until it was nothing more than a ripple. The silence that followed was profound, not the oppressive weight it had been, but a calm, serene stillness. The first light of morning pierced the cracked windows of the chapel, casting beams of warmth across the stone floor. Marcus sank to his knees, exhaustion weighing him down. Elena rushed to his side, pulling off her mask and wiping away the tears that mingled with lake water on her face. You did it, she whispered, voice thick with voice. Relief. Jacob and Nora appeared at the entrance, eyes wide as they took in the scene. The sense of dread that had gripped them since their arrival had lifted, replaced by a peaceful hush. The whispers were gone. The lake had been silenced, but this time, it was a silence born of freedom, not fear. Marcus looked at the journal, now open to the last page, where the final words glistened in the dim light. Peace comes when the echoes fade. He closed the book, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. The curse had been lifted, the souls released. Ebon Hollow would remain a story, but not one of horror and suffering. It would be a tale of resilience, sacrifice, and the enduring search for peace. As the team stepped for peace out into the morning light, the lake mirrored the sky, calm and clear. The silence that greeted them was no longer ominous, but a promise of a new beginning, free from the echoes of the past. Liam Parker had always been drawn to the unusual. As an independent journalist, he thrived on uncovering hidden corners of urban legends and forgotten tales. His career had taken him from abandoned asylums to cursed forests, each place leaving up its mark on him. But nothing had prepared him for what he found in his mailbox that crisp autumn morning. The envelope was unlike any he had seen. Aged parchment sealed with wax, the emblem of an ornate eye pressed into the deep red. His fingers tingled as he broke the seal, the scent of old paper and something metallic wafting up to meet him. The card inside was simple, yet elegant, with gold embossed lettering that shimmered in the dim light of his small apartment. You are invited to the midnight market. When the last chime of midnight rings, follow the old train tracks beneath the city. Discover what lies hidden. The words made his pulse quicken. The midnight market was the stuff of whispered tales, spoken of only in the shadowy corners of underground clubs and in the margins of obscure forums online. It was said to appear only when the city itself was asleep, existing in the liminal space between dusk and dawn. Those who claimed to have seen it spoke of wonders and horrors that defied explanation, goods that couldn't be bought with mere money and secrets exchanged for the most personal of sacrifices. Liam felt a shiver run down his spine. Half excitement, half apprehension, he glanced out the window. The city beyond was bathed in the last orange glow of the setting sun, shadows lengthening across the rooftops. His mind raced. Who could have sent this invitation? Why him? He was known in certain circles for his relentless pursuit of the supernatural, but this was different. This felt personal. Hours ticked by slowly. As the city's clock tower struck 11, Liam gathered his gear, a recorder, a notebook, a flashlight, and his trusty camera. His satchel felt heavier than usual, as if it sensed the gravity of what was to come. The streets outside were quiet, the usual hum of traffic and voices subdued, as if the city itself knew that something was about to happen. He walked with purpose, navigating narrow alleys and deserted back streets until he reached the old, disused train tracks that snaked beneath the heart of the city. The rusted metal gleamed faintly in the pale moonlight, half buried under decades of grime and twisted weeds. The entrance to the tunnel yawned before him, dark and uninviting, a portal to an underworld few dared to tread. The air grew colder as he stepped onto the tracks, the chill biting through his thin jacket and settling deep into his bones. Each step echoed off the stone walls, a rhythmic drumbeat that matched the quickening pace of his heart. The final chime of midnight rang out, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. A soft glow pulsed from deeper within the tunnel, casting long, shifting shadows that danced like specters. The low hum of voices reached his ears, a chant, rhythmic and ancient, that resonated in his chest. It resonated in his chest, was a sound that spoke of forgotten rituals and the weight of unseen eyes. Liam's breath caught in his throat as he rounded a bend and the tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous space. What lay before him defied expectation. Strung between iron, defied expectation. Strung between iron. Beams were strings of lights, their bulbs glowing with a warm, otherworldly radiance that seemed to shift colors when viewed out of the corner of his eye. Stalls lined the perimeter, each draped in silks and satins of impossible hues, and behind them stood figures that could only be described as fantastical, some human, others twisted with features that made his mind reel. A giant statue loomed at the center of the market, carved from black stone and depicting a woman whose face was obscured by a hood. Her outstretched hand held a scale that tipped ever so slightly, as if measuring the weight of unseen sins around him. The hum of voices grew, shifting from the rhythmic chant to a murmur of activity as the market's patrons traded, bartered, and whispered secrets. "Welcome to the midnight market," a voice rasped from the shadows behind him. Liam spun around, heart pounding, to find an old man in a robe that shimmered like liquid gold. The man's eyes were pitchwood gold, black, devoid of whites, and a grin split his face, revealing teeth that glittered like polished metal. "First time, I take it?" the man asked, the grin never faltering. Liam nodded, unable to find his voice. The old man chuckled, a sound that seemed to scrape against the walls of the cavern. "Careful, newcomer. The market gives, but it also takes. Know what you seek before you ask for it, or you might find the price too steep." The warning echoed in Liam's mind as he took his first hesitant steps into the midnight market, the pulse of its secrets and dangers drawing him deeper. Liam's initial awe at the night market's strange beauty gave way to a gnawing tension as he ventured deeper. The glow of the lights overhead flickered, casting fractured patterns that seemed to move with a life of their own. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke, spices, and something more sinister like iron, sharp and metallic. Each stall was more bizarre than the last, with vendors that defied any logic Liam had ever known. To his left, a woman with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian showcased glass jars filled with swirling, luminescent liquid. Each jar emitted a faint, otherworldly hum, and as he passed, the woman's deep-set eyes met his, a knowing smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Memories, traveler," she said. "Her," she said. "Ah," voice low and melodic. "Yours for the taking or the giving, trade wisely." Liam swallowed hard, the implications settling in his mind. Memories as currency? He forced himself to keep moving, resisting the urge to ask questions. He wasn't here to get entangled, only to observe and document. A few steps further, he paused in front of a booth draped in crimson velvet. The vendor was a towering figure, shrouded in a robe, face obscured except for a pair of gleaming cat-like eyes. The stall was filled with odd trinkets, rings, brooches, and necklaces that seemed to whisper as they caught the light. Amulets of binding, talismans of truth, the vendor intoned, voice deep and resonant. Objects that can protect or betray, depending on how they're used. Choose. But choose with care. A sudden commotion drew Liam's attention to the center of the market, where the massive statue stood, its hooded face casting deep shadows over the crowd. A figure stumbled backward, clutching something close to its chest. The crowd parted, eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and fear. A different vendor, gaunt and sharp-featured, stepped forward from the crowd. His eyes gleamed like coals as he pointed a gnarled finger at the thief. "You dare steal from the market?" The accused, a young man with wild eyes and ragged clothes, shook his head frantically. I didn't know the cost," the vendor sneered, and in an instant, the market's hum shifted, growing darker, more menacing. The crowd murmured, as shadows seemed to coalesce around the young man, pulling at him like tendrils. Liam watched, heart thundering, as the figure was swallowed by darkness, the echo of his screams lingering for just a moment before the market resumed its usual rhythm, as if nothing had happened. "Remember, traveler," the old man in the gold robe whispered from behind Liam. "There!" Market takes as easily as it gives. The air seemed colder now, and Liam's hand instinctively went to the satchel at his side, as if seeking reassurance. He knew he needed to find out more, but each passing moment chipped away at his resolve. He moved on, his eyes darting to the countless wares and the beings who peddled them. Some stalls sold items that glittered with promised tiny bottles labeled "Distilled Courage," powders with the shimmer of stardust, and scrolls that promised theory, reading of one's fate. Others were darker, with shadowy figures offering contracts written in looping, spidery script. Liam stopped at a booth shrouded in black silk. The vendor, a figure whose face was hidden behind an elaborate mask of bone and feathers, met his gaze. The stall was nearly empty, save for a single large book bound in cracked leather and etched with runes that seemed to move when looked at directly. The masked vendor said, voice muffled but clear, "Within these pages lie the stories of those who came before you. Some sought fortune, others sought truth. All paid a price." Liam's fingers hovered over the book, curiosity battling caution. He glanced at the vendor, who tilted their head as if daring him to touch it. Before he could decide, the tattooed woman from earlier appeared beside him, her eyes sharp and focused. "Don't," she said, a warning lacing her voice. That book binds more than it reveals. Startled, Liam pulled his hand back, heart pounding. The vendor's masked face seemed to smirk, and without another word, they vanished into the crowd, taking the book and its secrets with them. What is this place, really? What is this place, really? Liam asked, turning to the woman. It's more than just a market, isn't it? Her gaze softened, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing her features. The midnight market is older than the city above it, older than the stories people tell. It's a place of bargains and debts, where wishes come true at a cost. And now that you're here, the market will test you. The tattooed woman's words echoed in Liam's mind as they moved deeper into the heart of the market. The space seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The whispers of unseen figures weaving a chilling symphony around them. The air grew colder, carrying with it the metallic scent he had noticed before, stronger now, as though the market itself were bleeding. Liam glanced at the woman beside him. Her dark eyes were unreadable, but the set of her jaw suggested that she knew far more than she was telling. "Why did you stop me?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Because the market isn't just a place. It's a force," she replied. "Everything here binds, every word spoken, every trade made. That book you almost touched contains the echoes of those who dared too much." Liam felt the weight of her words, a chill settling over him that had nothing to do with the air. "Why help me?" he pressed. Her expression softened. "Just a fraction, because once I was like you, curious, bold, and blind to the consequences. I made a trade that left me bound here, serving the market's will." She turned her arm to show a mark hidden. Among the intricate tattoos, a spiral enclosed by an eye, the same symbol that had haunted him since he arrived. Before he could ask more, a deep, resonant chime echoed through the cavern. The lights above flickered, casting long, jagged shadows across the stone floor. The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning toward the statue at the center of the market. The hooded figure seemed to come alive, its stone arm raising slightly, and a voice that rumbled like an ancient river filled the air. "A bargain has been struck, and a debt must be paid." Liam's breath caught as a figure stepped forward, hooded and cloaked in midnight blue. The crowd parted like water, some bowing their heads, others shuffling back as if to avoid being caught in whatever was about to happen. The hooded figure carried an object in its hand, a small black stone that glowed with a dull, unsettling light. The tattooed woman's eyes widened with recognition. "That's a binding stone?" "She shets," whispered. "Someone's debt is about to be collected." The hooded figure approached a stall where an elderly man stood, his face lined with worry and resignation. The vendor's hands shook as he reached out, touching the stone with trembling fingers. The glow intensified, spreading up his arm like fire, and his eyes rolled back as a sigh escaped his lips. The whispers around them grew louder, like a storm circling the chamber. Liam took a step back, heart hammering in his chest. He turned to the woman, voice hoarse. "What happens when a debt is collected?" She didn't look at him, eyes fixed on the scene. "The market takes what it's owed. Sometimes it's life, sometimes soul, sometimes something worse." The glow faded, and the elderly man slumped forward, eyes vacant and lifeless. The stone, and lifeless, dropped from his fingers and shattered on the ground, sending up a spark that snuffed out as quickly as it appeared. The hooded figure turned, its gaze sweeping over the crowd, and for a brief moment, Liam felt those eyes settle on him. His blood ran cold. "Come with me," the woman said, pulling him by the arm. "We need to move." They wove through the throngs of silent onlookers, past stalls that seemed darker now, their wares less inviting. The whispers followed them, a chorus less inviting, of warnings and secrets that nipped at their heels. The woman led him to a secluded alcove, far from the crowd. Here, the lights were dimmer, casting the space in shadow. She turned to face him, her expression serious. If you stay here too long, the market will find a way to claim you. It tempts you with things you desire most, makes you forget the cost until it's too late. Liam's mind raced, piecing together what he'd seen and heard. But why invite me here? Why send me that card? Because the market has a will of its own, she said. It seeks new stories, new debts. Your arrival wasn't chance, it was summoned. And now, you have to decide what role you'll play. The hum of the market grew louder, a low vibration that resonated in his bones. For the first time, Liam felt the full weight of where he was and what it meant. This was more than a place of mystery. It was a living entity, ancient and unyielding, bound by bargains and debts that spanned centuries. What if I don't want to play any role? He whispered, fear lacing his voice. The woman's eyes softened, a look of pity crossing her face. Then you better find a way out before the market chooses one for you. The alcove where Liam and the tattooed woman stood felt like a brief sanctuary amid the chaos of the market. The hum of whispers and distant cries reached them like a fading echo, but the sense of urgency in the air remained palpable. Liam's mind churned with questions, but one loomed larger than the rest. What did the market want from him? The woman, sensing his turmoil, spoke softly. If you're going to survive this place, you need to understand it. The midnight market thrives on desire and the willingness to pay any cost. But there's more. It's also a prison, binding those who have crossed its boundaries and made irreversible choices. Why stay then? Liam asked, frustration edging his voice. Why don't those trapped here find a way to break free? A shadow passed over her face, the tattoos along her arms seeming to writhe in the dim light, because the market is as much a part of them as they are of it. It holds their memories, their fears, their very essence, even if they escape. Their very essence, even if they escape, leave behind pieces they can never reclaim. Before Liam could process her words, a sudden roar erupted from the center of the market. The statue at the heart of the space trembled, and a fissure snaked its way up from its base, splitting the hooded figure down the middle. Golden light spilled out, bathing the market in an eerie glow that painted everything in shades of fire. Liam's eyes widened as a figure emerged from the cracked stone, a tall, thin man with skin like polished onyx and eyes that glowed like embers. His presence silenced the market, vendors and patrons alike bowing their heads or retreating into the shadows. The tattooed woman stiffened, a flicker of fear crossing her face. That's him, she whispered. The warden of the market. The warden's voice, deep and resonant, filled the cavern. A debt unpaid festers like an open wound. Tonight, we shall see who dares to defy their bargain. Liam's pulse quickened as he realized that all eyes were wise, turning toward him. The market shifted, the ground beneath his feet vibrating as the warden stepped closer. The figure's gaze locked onto Liam, burning with an intensity that made his breath catch. You? The warden said, the word slicing through the silence. You carry the scent of curiosity and rebellion. You seek understanding where others only seek trade. Why? The crowd held its breath, the silence so profound that Liam could hear the pounding of his own heart. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he spoke. I came because I was called. I want to know why. What does the market want from me? What does the market want from me? The warden's eyes narrowed, and the golden light around him flared. The market calls those who have a story worth telling, a price worth paying. You are both witness and participant, bound by fate and choice. He extended a long, bony finger toward Liam. But now, you must choose. Will you take from the market or give to it? The tattooed woman grabbed Liam's arm, her grip tight. Don't answer. The moment you do, you're bound to whatever bargain you strike. Liam's mind raced. The market was a living, breathing entity, and now it had focused its attention on him. Breathing entity. And now it had focused its attention on him. He could feel the weight of the warden's gaze, the anticipation of the crowd, and the pulse of the market itself pressing in from all sides. The air felt electric, charged with possibility and danger. But beneath the fear, a spark of defiance flared in Liam's chest. He hadn't come this far just to be a pawn. He took a step forward, meeting the warden's burning gaze with as much resolve as he could muster. "I won't make a bargain blindly," Liam said, his voice steadier now. "I won't make a bargain blindly," Liam said, his voice steadier now. "I want to know the truth about the market, about why it binds people and takes their memories, their lives. If I'm going to choose, I need to understand what I'm choosing." A murmur rippled through the crowd, the market's patrons exchanging glances filled with surprise and trepidation. The warden tilted his head, a glint of amusement or perhaps respect flickering in his ember eyes. "Very well," the warden said, the light around him dimming slightly. "To seek truth is to court both, knowledge and madness. But know this, the deeper you go, the greater the price you must pay." With a wave of his hand, the warden gestured to a dark passageway that seemed to appear out of nowhere, carved into the far wall of the cavern. The tattooed woman's face paled, and she shook her head. "That path leads to the heart of the market," she said, voice shaking. "No one who enters comes back the same." Liam's pulse raced as he looked at the passageway, the shadows within seeming to shift and breathe. He could feel the weight of the market's gaze, the whispers growing louder as if urging him forward. He took a deep breath, casting one last glance at the woman who had warned him, and stepped into the darkness. Darkness of the passageway was suffocating, pressing against Liam like a living thing. The whispers of the market faded behind him, replaced by a low, rhythmic thrum that pulsed through the stone walls, matching the beat of his heart. The air grew colder, tinged with a metallic tang that sent shivers down his spine. He adjusted the strap of his satchel, the familiar weight, a small comfort amid the encroaching dread. As he moved deeper, faint lights flickered to life, casting an eerie blue glow that illuminated carvings along the walls. The figures depicted were twisted and grotesque, their expressions contorted in a blend of ecstasy and terror. They seemed to reach out, their stone hands frozen mid-gesture, as if it warning him to turn back. But Liam pressed on, driven by the need to understand, to unravel the mystery that had haunted him since the moment he received the invitation. He thought of the warden's eyes, the way they had pierced through him with that mix of challenge and expectation. He couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead and what the market truly wanted from him. The corridor opened into a vast chamber unlike anything he had seen before. It was circular, with a high vaulted ceiling that seemed to disappear into darkness. In the center stood an altar made of black obsidian, its surface polished to a mirror-like sheen. Surrounding it were figures cloaked in shadow, their faces obscured by hoods. They moved in a slow, deliberate circle, chanting in a language Liam did not recognize. Above the altar, suspended in the air, was a crystalline sphere that pulsed with a soft, golden light. Inside, faint shapes shifted faces that flickered in and out of Focus, mouths open in silent screams or whispers. Liam's breath caught as he realized what he was looking at. Memories. Lives. The tattooed woman's warning came rushing back to him. The market binds those who trade, keeping fragments of their who trade, keeping fragments of their very souls as collateral. He took a hesitant step forward, the ground beneath him cool and smooth. One of the hooded figures turned its head slightly, and although its face was hidden, Liam felt the weight of its gaze settle on him like Akash. Shroud? You seek the truth, the figure intoned, voice deep and resonant, vibrating through the chamber. But truth is not given, it is taken, at a price. The other figures stilled, their chanting ceasing as the chamber plunged into silence. The glow of the sphere intensified, casting beams of golden light that painted the hooded figures and the walls in a surreal tableau. What is the market's purpose? Liam asked, forcing the words past the lump in his throat. His voice sounded small in the vastness of the room. The central figure stepped forward, a long skeletal hand emerging from the folds of its robe to gesture toward the sphere. The market was born from desire, it said, a place where what is hidden can be found, where what is yearned for can be grasped. But all things of worth come with sacrifice. Liam's eyes locked on the sphere, the faces inside moving more frantically now, as if sensing his attention. One face, a woman's, turned toward him, her expression etched with sorrow. A chill ran down his spine as he recognized her from an old newspaper clipping, one of the countless stories of those who had vanished without a trace, believed lost to the city's mysteries. Can they be freed? He asked, the question escaping before he could stop himself. The figure shifted, the silence thickening as the central figure spoke again. To free the echoes of the market is to unravel its very fabric. To do so would mean breaking the balance, forfeiting your place among the living. A rush of air swept through the chamber, carrying with it the sound of 1,000 whispers, each one a thread of longing, regret, and desperation. The sphere pulsed, and the golden light layers flared, casting everything in a stark, unnatural brilliance. Liam took another step forward, the temptation gnawing at him. The market's power was undeniable, but so was the cost. He thought of the tattooed woman's haunted eyes, the stories she must have carried, bound to this place by a choice she couldn't undo. What if I choose to give, not to take? He asked, the realization settling over him like a cold weight. Can the balance be shifted without breaking it? The hooded figures remained silent, but the central one seemed to regard him with an inscrutable expression. The air grew heavier, and the sphere above the altar dimmed, its light softening until it was no brighter than a candle. To give freely is to offer what cannot be returned, the figure said at last. It is to bind oneself to the market, not as a debtor, but as its keeper. Liam's heart thudded painfully in his chest. The choice was clear, but its consequences were vast, reaching far beyond the confines of this hidden world. He looked up at the sphere, the faces within now still, watching him with silent, pleading eyes. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Liam stood at the edge of the obsidian altar, the chamber's silence pressing against him like a physical force. The hooded figures around him remained motionless, their shrouded forms casting long, spidery shadows across the floor. The crystalline sphere above the altar pulsed softly. The faces within frozen, eyes locked onto him, with expressions that ranged from hope to despair. The weight of his decision settled like a stone in his gut. The tattooed woman's warning echoed in his mind. The market takes as easily as it gives. Choose carefully. But this was different. He wasn't here to bargain for power or knowledge. He was here to understand, to uncover the market's true nature and the price it exacted. The central figure stepped closer, its skeletal hand extending toward the sphere. To offer yourself as the keeper is to accept a bond that transcends life and death, it said, its voice deep and reverberating. It is to guard the echoes, to become part of the market's very essence. Liam's throat tightened as he glanced at the glowing sphere. The faces inside shifted again, their silent mouths forming words he couldn't hear, but felt deep within his chest. The chamber pulsed with a low hum, as if urging him to decide. "What happens to me if I accept?" Liam asked, his voice steady but laced with an undertone of fear. The hooded figure paused, the air growing colder as it spoke. "You will remain bound to this place, neither living nor dead. You will be the guardian of the market's secrets, its stories, its whispers. But you will have the power to change the balance, to offer peace to those trapped within." A murmur rippled through the other figures, a soft chorus of agreement or perhaps warning. The light from the sphere intensified, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the icy chill creeping up Liam's spine. He glanced back at the passageway he had come through, the faint glow of the market beyond now distant and unreachable. The temptation to turn and run was strong, to leave this hidden world behind and forget its strange allure. But then he thought of the faces in the sphere, the countless lives bound by their choices, unable to find peace. The young man whose screams had been swallowed by the market, the tattooed woman's haunted eyes, each one a testament to the market's power and the price of ignorance. He met the gaze of the central figure, resolve hardening in his chest. "I accept," Liam said, the words leaving him with a finality that sent a shiver down his spine. The figure's hand moved to the sphere, and a wave of golden light burst forth, flooding the chamber with warmth and brilliance. The hooded figures began to chant, their voices blending into a harmonious hum that resonated deep within Liam's core. The faces in the sphere turned toward him, their expressions shifting from despair to something else: relief, gratitude, hope. The light enveloped Liam, filling him with a sensation that was both excruciating and transcendent. Memories not his own flooded his mind, lives lived, choices made, bargains struck and broken. He felt the pain of loss, the thrill of discovery, the weight of regret. It was overwhelming, a torrent of emotion and experience that threatened to drown him. But then, as suddenly as it began, the flood receded, leaving a quiet calm in its wake. The chamber dimmed, the golden glow fading to a soft, steady light. Liam opened his eyes, the sensation of the closing of his eyes weakened his eyes. The sensation of the market's pulse now intertwined with his own. He could feel its heartbeat, the whispers now clearer, no longer distant but familiar, like old friends speaking in hushed tones. The hooded figure stepped back, and the others lowered their heads in as silent acknowledgement. The tattooed woman appeared at the entrance of the chamber, her eyes wide with disbelief and something else: respect. "You are the keeper now," the central figure said, its voice softer, almost reverent. "The market is yours to guard, to guide, to balance." Liam took a breath, feeling the weight of his new role settle over him. The whispers around him softened, no longer a cacophony but a symphony of stories waiting to be heard. He knew that his life would never be the same, bound as he was to the midnight market, but he also knew that he had the power to make a difference, to bring peace to those who had been trapped for far too long. As he turned to face the market beyond, the voices of the market beyond, the voices of the echoes followed him, their song now one of hope. As Liam stepped out of the chamber and back into the heart of the midnight market, everything looked different. The glowing stalls and vendors, the strings of lights that buzzed with ands, The thrumnais and Seisfried otherworldly hum, and the murmuring patrons all felt connected to him, as though he were seeing through a veil lifted by his new role as the keeper. The tattooed woman approached cautiously, her eyes searching his face for signs of change. "You did it," she whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and awe. "You took on the bond." Liam nodded, the full weight of his decision pressing against him. He felt both powerful and vulnerable, as if the market's secrets had fused with his very being. The whispers that had once been background noise were now distinct voices, each telling a story, sharing a regret, a warning, or a plea. He understood now that the market wasn't just a place of trade. It was a living archive of every choice made within its bounds. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted at the far end of the market. A stall, draped in deep crimson fabric, had drawn a crowd, and voices rose in panic and anger. Liam and the tattooed woman exchanged glance before hurrying over. The scene before them was chaos. A tall, gaunt vendor with eyes like polished obsidian stood rigid behind his stall, gesturing wildly at a young man who looked barely old enough to be there. The youth clutched a small, ornate dagger, its blade glinting with a faint, silvery light that seemed almost alive. The vendor's voice boomed over the noise, deep and accusatory. "You dare take what isn't yours?" he roared. "The price must be paid." The crowd shifted nervously, eyes flicking between the vendor, the young man, and Liam. Whispers rippled through the market, carrying the weight of expectation. The young man's eyes were wide with terror, but he stood his ground, clutching the dagger as if it were his only lifeline. Liam stepped forward, the crowd parting for him with a mix of reverence and fear. The whispers around him rose, some warning, others encouraging. He could feel the market's pulse quicken, sensing that tension in the air. "Wait," Liam said, his voice carrying with an authority he didn't know he possessed. The vendor turned to him, eyes narrowing as recognition dawned. The tattooed woman stayed close, her expression tense. "This is not your concern, keeper," the vendor said, the word keeper dripping with disdain. "The boy has stolen, and the market demands its due." Liam met the vendor's glare, the whispers around him coalescing into a single, clear message. Balance must be. Clear message. Balance must be maintained, but justice can be tempered with mercy. He took a breath, reaching for the newfound understanding that flowed through him. "What was promised for this dagger?" Liam asked, directing the question to the young man, who looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. The youth swallowed hard, his voice shaking. "My brother is dying. I needed something to save him. I didn't have enough to trade." A murmur spread through the crowd, the whispers shifting to a tone of sympathy. The vendor's eyes flashed, but Liam raised a hand, silencing him. "The market takes as it gives," Liam said, feeling the truth resonate within him. "But the purpose is not punishment, it is balance." He turned to the young man, seeing the desperation etched into his face. "You will return the dagger," Liam said, "but I will offer a part of my own bond to cover your debt." The crowd gasped. The tattooed woman's eyes widening in shock. The vendor's expression twisted in anger, but the whispers of the market shifted again, this time in agreement. "The bond is yours to give," the vendor said reluctantly, eyes narrowing. "But know this, each piece you offer weakens your own place." Liam nodded, feeling the pulse of the market shift as he placed his hand over the boy's trembling fingers, guiding him to return the dagger. The silvery light of the blade dimmed as it was placed back on the stall, and a wave of relief washed over the crowd. The tension dissipated, leaving behind a sense of quiet awe. The young man fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Liam offered a small, weary smile. "Go now, and remember that debts are not just paid in golden promises but in choices." As the crowd began to disperse, the tattooed woman stepped closer, her voice low. "You took on part of his debt." She took on part of his debt, she said, a hint of concern in her tone. "That's dangerous, even for a keeper?" Liam nodded, the weight of his choice settling in his chest. "I know," he said, glancing at the market around him. The whispers were softer now, a blend of approval and caution. But if the market is to have a keeper, it needs one who remembers that mercy is as powerful as justice. The tattooed woman's expression softened, a small smile breaking through her wary demeanor. "Maybe you're exactly what this place needed after all." Liam felt the truth of her words, the market's pulse now synchronized with his own. He knew this was only the beginning, that the midnight market would continue to test him, challenge him, but for the first time, he felt ready. The glow of the market dimmed as the crowd dispersed, leaving Liam and the tattooed woman in a quieter corner of the midnight market. The air felt different now, as if the market itself was processing what had just happened. The whispers had softened, but their tone carried an undercurrent of something Liam couldn't quite place: anticipation, or perhaps foreboding. "Every action has a ripple," the tattooed woman said, her voice breaking the silence. She glanced at Liam, eyes studying him as if searching for a clue to his thoughts. "Taking on the boy's debt was noble, but the market doesn't forget." "I know," Liam replied, the weight of his choice pressing on him. He could feel the subtle shift within himself, the part of his essence that now carried the boy's burden. It was like a shadow at the edge of his consciousness, a reminder that his place as keeper came with sacrifices. He was only beginning to understand. The woman leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "The warden will watch you more closely now. You broke tradition by offering mercy. Some will see it as a challenge." Before Liam could respond, the lights around them flickered, casting the market in a wavering glow. The stalls seemed to shift and warp, their colors darkening as if touched by shadow. A chill swept through the air, and the whispers surged, urgent and frantic. "The market tests its keepers," the woman said, eyes narrowing as she scanned. "Their surroundings. Be ready." A sharp, echoing sound, like the crack of splintering wood, cut through the din, drawing the attention of every being in the market. Liam turned, heart pounding, to see a rift opening in the stone floor near the center statue. The crack widened, revealing an inky darkness that pulsed with a life of its own. The hooded figures that had chanted around the altar now appeared from the shadows, their robes billowing as they moved toward the rift. The warden, as they moved toward the rift, emerged from behind the statue, his onyx skin gleaming in the dim light, eyes blazing with an intensity that made Liam's chest tighten. "Keeper," the warden called, his voice reverberating through the market like a drum. "A debt unpaid has awakened the void. It seeks to reclaim what was promised." Liam's pulse quickened as he stepped forward, the tattooed woman's hand on his arm a fleeting reassurance. The rift pulsed again, the darkness within it swirling like a storm. The whispers around him changed, turning into a chorus of warnings, each one clearer than the last. "Beware the void. It devours without mercy." The warden's eyes locked onto Liam, and for a moment, the market seemed to hold its breath. "Only the keeper can confront what lies within," he said, the challenge in his voice unmistakable. "Step forward and face the echoes of the past." The rift seemed to call to him, a silent, insistent pull that resonated in his chest. He took a deep bolt at what true restriction sees memories, and his chest and stride forward in a level breath, the weight of his role pressing on him like never before. The tattooed woman's fingers tightened on his arm, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "Don't face it alone," she said, voice shaking. "The void is not just a force. It's the embodiment of everything the market has taken. Memories, lives, fears it will test every part of you." Liam nodded, the whispers around him swelling into a crescendo as he stepped toward the rift. The cold seeped into his bones as he approached, and the light of the market dimmed further, leaving him standing in a halo of flickering shadows. He glanced back at the tattooed woman, her face pale but resolute, and felt a surge of determination. With a final breath, Liam stepped into the darkness. The cold was immediate and suffocating, a presence that wrapped itself around Liam as he stepped into the rift. The whispers of the market faded into silence, replaced by a low, resonant hum that vibrated in his chest and made his vision blur. The darkness was thick and impenetrable, pressing against him like a living entity, testing his resolve. He took a tentative step forward, the stone beneath his feet uneven and slick. A faint, shifting light appeared in the distance, flickering like a candle in a storm. As he approached, the light expanded, revealing a vast expanse filled with shadowy figures that moved like smoke. They had no defined shapes, only the suggestion of faces and hands reaching out, grasping at the void around them. The hum intensified, and Liam felt a sudden sharp pain in his temples. Memories that weren't his own flooded his mind, flashes of faces, voices crying out in desperation, hands clutching at empty air. He gasped, stumbling backward as the figures closed in, their whispers now audible and full of anguish. "Help us, release us." The plea sent a shiver down his spine. These were the echoes, the remnants of those who had bargained too much, given too willingly, and lost everything to the market. They were bound here, trapped in the void, their stories half told and unfinished. "Liam," a voice called, cutting through the cacophony like a blade. It was sharp, familiar, and filled with wisdom. It was sharp, familiar, and filled with urgency. He turned, squinting into the darkness, and saw the tattooed woman standing at the edge of the rift. Her figure was outlined in the faint, otherworldly light that seeped from the market beyond. "I told you not to face it alone." "She told you not to face it alone?" she said, stepping into the void. The darkness seemed to resist her, pushing back like an unseen tide, but she pushed forward, determination etched across her features. Her tattoos glowed faintly, the symbols pulsing in time with the hum of the hum of the hum of the void. The figures around them shifted, their focus now split between Liam and the woman. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they were a deafening roar. Liam clenched his fists, fighting to stay grounded as the void pushed and pulled at his consciousness. "What do you seek, Keeper?" The voice was different this time, deep and ancient, as if the void itself had spoken. It resonated through Liam, pressing against his mind and filling him with a dread so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. "I seek balance," Liam said, forcing the words out. "I seek to understand and to free those bound by their choices." The void pulsed, and the figures shifted, their forms writhing as the light around them grew. The whispers fell silent, replaced by the rhythmic thrum that now matched the beat of Liam's heart. The tattooed woman placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "To free them, you must confront what binds them," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Their memories, their pain, it's all here. You must choose to bear it, to share their burden." Liam's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the figures, their shadowy forms reaching out, eyes pleading for release. The weight of their suffering pressed down on him, a tide of despair that threatened to consume him. But beneath it, he felt something else, a spark of hope, fragile but present. He nodded, meeting the gaze of the closest figure. "I choose to share their burden," he said. The declaration ringing out into the silence. The void responded immediately. A wave of cold swept through him, carrying with it the pain, fear, and regret of countless souls. It was overwhelming, a torrent of emotion that sent him to his hiss. His vision blurred, and he felt the world tilt around him, but the woman's hand on his shoulder anchored him, kept him from slipping away. The figures shifted, their forms solidifying for a moment. Faces appeared, no longer shadowed, but real and filled with emotion. They looked at Liam with expressions of shock, gratitude, and relief. The whispers returned, softer now, a chorus of thanks and hope. The light in the void brightened, and the hum receded, replaced by a warm, steady glow. The figures began to fade, their forms dissolving into light that streamed upward, disappearing into the darkness above. The pressure on Liam's mind lifted, leaving him exhausted but unbroken. The tattooed woman knelt beside him, her eyes wide with amazement. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You freed them." The void around them shifted, the darkness softening until it was nothing more than a shadow. The rift at their feet began to close. The stone knitting itself back together as the last of the light faded. Liam stood, legs shaking, and looked at the woman. "What now?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Now we return," she said, a small, weary smile playing on her lips. "The market has its keeper, and the echoes have their peace. But remember, Liam, the market always remembers." As they stepped back toward the glow of the market, the whispers followed them, no longer haunting, but a soft song of gratitude and farewell. The air of the midnight market felt different as Liam and the tattooed woman emerged from the closing rift. The usual hum of whispers was quieter now, tinged with a sense of awe and anticipation. The market seemed to breathe, shifting as if acknowledging what had just transpired. Vendors and patrons alike turned their eyes to Liam, some with curiosity, others with glimmers of respect. The warden stood near the center statue, his onyx skin catching the soft, flickering light of the market's hanging lanterns. His ember-like eyes narrowed as they met Liam's, and for a moment, the two regarded each other in silence. The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the next move. "The echoes have found peace," the warden said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying through the market. "But the market's balance remains fragile. Keeper, you have chosen to bear a burden unlike any before you. Do you understand what this means?" Liam felt the weight of the warden's words press into him. The memories he had shared with the trapped soul still lingered in his mind, a haunting echo that would never truly leave. But he also felt something else, a sense of purpose, an understanding of the market's true nature that went beyond trade and barter. He nodded slowly. "I do," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion that threatened to drag him down. "I know that the market is not just a place of bargains, but a realm of stories and choices, and those stories deserve an end, not just a price." A murmur rippled through the crowd, the whispers of the market shifting, curious and intrigued. The tattooed woman stood beside him, her eyes locked on him. The warden with a defiant spark. The warden's gaze softened, and he inclined his head ever so slightly. "Then, you will guide it, not as a ruler, but as a guardian. The market will test you, push you, and at times defy you, but it will also reveal its secrets if you prove worthy. Before Liam could respond, a sudden rush of wind swept through the market, extinguishing the lanterns and plunging the space into near darkness. Gasps and murmurs filled the air as shadows crept along the stone floor, converging at the base of the central statue. The statue's eyes, once dull and lifeless, now glowed with a cold blue light. A voice, ancient and filled with wrath, echoed through the chamber. Not all debts are settled. Not all debts are settled, Keeper. Some shadows hold their grudges close. The air grew thick, suffocating. Liam's chest tightened as a figure began to form at the statue's base, coalescing from the darkness itself. It was tall, cloaked in a tattered shroud that shifted as though alive. Its eyes were empty voids, consuming and unyielding. The tattooed woman's hand went to Liam's arm, her grip fierce. "The shadow claimant," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. A spirit of audible over the pounding of his heart. Debts that were never meant to be paid, bound by the market's oldest laws. The claimant's gaze turned to Liam, and the whispers in the market surged, chaotic and panicked. The figure's voice was a low growl, like the rumble of distant thunder. "You dare to change the balance, to free what was mine." Liam's breath came in shallow gasps, but he forced himself to meet the spirit's gaze. He could feel the echoes of the freed souls within him, their collective relief and gratitude bolstering his courage. He took a step forward, the weight of his role as keeper settling more firmly on his shoulders. "They were not yours to keep," he said, his voice ringing out clear and unwavering. "The market's balance is maintained not by hoarding suffering, but by allowing stories to end, debts to be paid, and souls to find peace." The claimant let out a hiss, the shadows around it roiling like a storm. It surged forward, the air growing colder, filled with the sting of ice and despair. Liam braced himself, every instinct screaming to flee, but the tattooed woman stepped beside him, her tattoos glowing with an inner light that pushed back the encroaching darkness. "Stand firm," she said, her voice steady. "The market chose you for this." Liam closed his eyes into the well of memories and stories that had been passed to him. The echoes whispered in unison, their voices a song of resilience and hope. He felt the warmth spread through him, countering the chill of the claimant's power. When he opened power, his eyes, they glowed faintly with the same light that radiated from the woman's tattoos. The claimant hesitated, its form flickering as if uncertain, returned to the void. "Liam commanded," the power in his voice surprising even himself. Your debt is settled. The market will not bind souls to your chains anymore," the figure screamed, a sound that tore through the market like a gale, rattling the stalls and sending a wave of darkness that dissipated as quickly as it came. The claimant's form crumbled, shadows peeling away like smoke until there was nothing left but silence. The market exhaled, the tension lifting as the lanterns reignited, casting a warm, steady light. The whispers were no longer frantic but awed, a chorus of acknowledgement and acceptance. The warden stepped forward, eyes glinting with a mixture of pride and solemnity. "You have proven yourself, Keeper," he said. "But know this, the market stories are endless, and each one comes with endless, a choice." Liam nodded, the echoes within him now quiet hum. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the midnight market held more secrets, more challenges, and more stories waiting to be told. But he also knew that he was ready. The midnight market was bathed in the soft glow of lanterns, their light dancing across the stalls and casting long, gentle shadows. The tension that had gripped the space only moments before had melted into a rare stillness, a sense of collective and relief washing over patrons and vendors alike. Liam stood at the center, the whispers of the market now a gentle murmur that resonated in his bones. He was the keeper now, not just in title, but in spirit. The tattooed woman, whose name he realized he still didn't know, stepped forward. The glow of her tattoos had faded, leaving her looking almost human, almost vulnerable. She studied him for a moment, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You did what no one's thought possible," she said, her voice low and filled with an emotion that Liam couldn't quite name. "You faced the claimant and turned the tide. The market will remember this night." Liam nodded, exhaustion seeping into his bones now that the adrenaline had worn off. He glanced around at the market, the faces of its patrons, both human and otherwise, watching him with newfound respect. The vendors had resumed their quiet calls, bartering in hushed tones as if not to disturb the fragile peace. The warden approached, his onyx skin reflecting the light of the lanterns. His eyes, once blazing with challenge, now held a softer glow. "You have proven your mettle, keeper. The market has accepted you, but this place holds more than echoes and shadows. It holds stories yet to be told, paths yet to be chosen." Liam met the warden's gaze, a surge of determination rekindling in his chest. "I know," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the realization. "And I will guide it, protect it, and ensure that those who come here understand the balance they are stepping into." The warden inclined his head in a gesture of acknowledgement. "Then your journey begins anew, but with eyes unclouded by fear or ignorance." The crowd, sensing the end of the night's extraordinary events, began to disperse. Vendors returned to their stalls, adjusting wares and engaging in quiet negotiations, while patrons shared glances filled with wonder and cautious optimism. The market's whispers shifted, their tone no longer one of warnings and secrets, but of curiosity and quiet approval. The tattooed woman reached out, her fingers brushing Liam's arm. "You've changed more than just the market tonight," she said. "You've given hope to those who thought they would never see the light again." Liam felt a pang of emotion, the echoes within him murmuring in agreement. The faces of those he had freed, their stories, now at rest, would stay with him always. He took a deep breath, the scent of spices and smoke filling his lungs, and felt a sense of purpose settle over him as the first hint of dawn broke beyond the cavern, casting a pale light that crept through the cracks in the stone walls. The midnight market began to fade. The magic that held it together whispered its goodbyes, a soft collective exhale that signaled the end of another night. Liam turned to the tattooed woman. "Will you stay?" She tilted her head, the ghost of a smile returning. "I have been bound to this place for so long that I don't know what freedom feels like. But with you as the keeper, perhaps it's time I found out." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then find your story, and know that the market will always welcome you." With that, she stepped back, disappearing into the crowd that ebbed and flowed like a living tide. Liam watched her go, feeling a strange mix of loss and anticipation. The market was his now, its secrets intertwined with his very being. But he knew that each night would bring new challenges, new faces, and new stories waiting to be told. As the last of the patrons faded into the city beyond and the glow of the college articulations and oratorium over a telltale in the prepared cell street. The market dimmed. Liam stood alone at its heart, the whispers now a gentle hum in the back of his mind. The midnight market had a keeper, and its echoes were at peace, but the dawn held its own secrets, and Liam was ready to face whatever came next.